All right, so I want to talk a little bit about where we're at. I want to jump. I want to start off talking about the NFL. Right now, we are currently set with the NFL playoffs. So, kind of a wild day. I'm going to kind of try to skim, kind of talk a little bit about what happened yesterday. That Minnesota Vikings and Detroit Lions game. Detroit is looking like a real juggernaut, but we'll talk about that later. So right now, the NFL playoffs are set. The Lions in the NFC and the Chiefs in the AFC have first round buys. Obviously, after the wild card weekend, the both teams will play the lowest remaining seed in the first round. So let's look at some of the matchups, right? So we have the Texans going against the Chargers. So Texans at 4, Chargers at 5. This is on the AFC side. We have the Ravens at 3, and against the Steelers at 6. Those games are super, difficult to judge whether it's just to pick a winner or to bet on it. Why? Because whenever divisional foes play against each other, it's always super competitive, and this could literally be decided by a field goal, especially with the Steelers defense, incredible defense, and Lamar Jackson is just playing MVP out of his mind. And then lastly, we have the Bills versus Broncos, and I'm gonna tell you something. If there was a game for there to be an upset, that is the game that I'm eyeing. Obviously, the Broncos just played the Bills, and the Bills didn't play any of their starters. But Bo Nix, he has just gotten better as the season has progressed, and I'm gonna tell you, if the Bills don't come ready for that game, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. The Broncos and that defense are looking legit. So you never know. There's no sure thing in sports. And if there's ever a sleeper, that would be my sleeper for this round. So in the NFC, we have the Rams versus the Vikings. It's incredible. I just saw a stat on Instagram. I think prior to 2024, like in NFL history, any team that had won 14 games had won their division. And obviously, because of what happened last night, Detroit versus Minnesota, Minnesota Vikings, went from, battling for first place to now being in fifth place. And, they're not your typical 5, right? You're talking about a team that ended the NFL season 14-3, which is insane. So yeah, they're going up against the Rams. The Rams, got hot at the end of the season. I'm still, if I have to go with anybody, there's just no way that I'm gonna pick against the Vikings. The Buccaneers against the Commanders. If I had to pick a game, like a must-see game, I would definitely, some people would, may go against what I have to say. They probably side with the Eagles and Packers. But this Buccaneers and Commanders game is going to be a good one. Jalen Daniels, man, he's played great. The Commanders have, they surprised and shocked everybody. And, thankfully the Buccaneers were able to turn it around, at the end of the season and pile up some wins and get into the playoffs. But I think that's going to be a pretty good game. And then lastly, at 4:30 on Sunday, on Sunday, we have the Eagles versus Packers. And that should definitely be an interesting one. So yesterday there was a bunch of games, right, that really, had really no meaning, for playoff seeding. We had the Ravens at Browns. There's one team, man. It pains me to see that they got left out of the playoffs. Because if I had to vote, I would cast an MVP for Joe Burrow, and it's the Cincinnati Bengals. I was looking on Instagram and I saw a stat where they had a bunch of individual players that were number 1 in stats. Like Joe Burrow's number 1 in like passing yards, touchdowns. Jamar Chase was like number 1 in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns, I think. We had Bruce Brown had an insane amount of yards from scrimmage. So it's insane that this team had so much individual success, but they ended up 9-8 and out of the playoffs. And a lot of that obviously was their defense. They had a horrible defense. It's hard to score 30 points and still lose a game, and they saw a lot of that. They saw a lot of that. They had a lot of one possession games at the beginning of the year that of games that they should not have lost, especially that first game against my Patriots. They had no business losing that game, and they still did. And that's kind of what led. That was a microcosm of what led them to miss the playoffs, which is it's horrible. You're not supposed to miss the playoffs if you're a team like the Cincinnati Bengals that was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and theoretically they've only gotten better, right? Because you got T. Higgins, you have a pretty good supporting cast, and they've just been kind of horrible. So that's tough if you're a Bengals fan. The Panthers, man, it's incredible how everybody was writing Bryce Young off, and this kid has started to shine as the end of the season has come up, and he's played very, very good. I'm happy. It's tough when you are. It has to be tough when you're a number one pick and people are slating you as a scrub, as a bust. It has to be really tough, and I'm so glad that he's playing better. And that they finished the season 5-12. Obviously, they stacked up a couple wins towards the end of the season. I hope that can roll over to next season. On the flip coin of that same game against the Falcons, they were a team that they signed Kirk Cousins. You were expecting them to fight for the playoffs. Then they end up sitting Kirk Cousins to then start Michael Penix. I don't know. If you ask me, the Atlanta Falcons, they're the definition, along with some other teams, of like bad teams that make bad decisions. But that's just my opinion. Commanders, beat the Cowboys. There's not much to see there. The Bears, the Bears. Wow. Incredible that team was 4-2 at one point, and they ended the season 5-12. They beat the Packers, who obviously didn't have much, left to play for, really, 24-22. We had the Texans, who have, ended the season a little bit shaky, a couple of losses there. They beat the Titans, 23-14, who now own the number one pick going in to the 2026 NFL draft. So, shout out to the Titans, who ended up with the first pick. Browns end up with the second pick. Giants end up with the third pick. Patriots with the fourth, and Jacksonville Jaguars with the fifth pick. So, Titans, who knows? That team, in my eyes, has always been a subpar team. I don't think they've really, drafted all that well. So let's see what happens and how the whole Shooter Sanders experiment, ends up going for them. If they do end up drafting him at first, we'll have to see there. Colts won their game versus Jaguars in overtime. If your team that was fighting, it's fighting for the playoffs. It's insane that you came down to having to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars in overtime. The Jaguars, have been a horrible team, just the whole season, and that just kind of shows, why the Colts didn't make the playoffs. Patriots, beat the Bills. Obviously, Bills really had nothing else to play for. They, you could see when, they punted the ball on the 35-yard line. We had Joe Milton, the third, who came in, showed some good stuff. Obviously, he's playing against backups, but it's always great to know that you have a backup that can come in and put some points on the board if anything were to happen to Drake May in that situation. Eagles beat the Giants. No surprise there. Buccaneers beat the Saints. Saints was a team that I had a lot of hopes for. But just, Spencer Rattler is just, he's not it. He's not it. I, I don't know what to say. I saw a couple of games. He could have moved the needle. He's just not a good quarterback, in my opinion. Broncos beat the Chiefs 38-0. Chargers beat the Raiders 34-20. Seahawks, surprising team there. Seahawks beat the Rams 30-25. The Jets, playing spoiler, beat the Dolphins. Even though the Dolphins, though I think prior to that game were already eliminated from the playoffs. Cardinals beat the 49ers. 49ers, this is just a disappointment of a season. Team with championship aspirations, and they end up the season 6-11. Don't know what to say about that one. And the Lions come in and just put a beat down on the Vikings, man. This Lions team is right now, if you asked me at the beginning of the season, I probably would have said, against my better judgment, against my fan judgment, that the Chiefs were probably the overall favorite to win the championship. But this Lions team, if it does come down to a Chiefs and Lions Super Bowl, I just believe that the Lions are an overall better team. I don't know, the Chiefs, they've had a lot of things just really go their way, and I'm not sure that they're just that good of a team. So I really believe that the Lions are, above all, the best team in the NFL. They showed it. Ended up the season 15-2. They had, in terms of like plus minuses, their point differential was a lot better than most teams. They were just a really good team. They dominated all across, the board. So if you had to ask me, if I had to put some money on it, I would say that the Detroit Lions are going to be the Super Bowl champions this year. All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there. Just wanted to kind of cover what happened yesterday, in football. We're going to have some pretty good games. I'm going to try to, after the games are over next weekend, I want to cover, some of the stuff that happens in the games and, just kind of follow the road to the Super Bowl. All right. Thanks for watching.